So some unfair labor practices, and specifically in this case by management, might include interference with concerted activities, meaning interference really with just union activities in their normal business. Is there a complete separation? No. Can management work with the union and whatnot? Certainly. Okay, but they can't interfere, with things that they may want to do. They can't dominate a labor organization. In other words, put one in place that they kind of control and want to control. They can't discriminate based on union affiliation. That one just kind of makes sense, right? Can't discriminate or retaliate, right, based on a result of an NLRB proceeding, and they can't refuse to bargain. So they have to come to the bargaining table, and they have to do so in good faith. There are compulsory bargaining issues, and those include wages and hours, right, terms and conditions of employment, etc., things like that. Voluntary can be internal union business. So maybe management has a complaint about the folks that are running the union. Maybe they don't get along well. They could ask to talk about that, but the union doesn't have to, right? Again, designation of negotiators, kind of the same thing, and whether or not to make transcripts of negotiations. Those are things that can be bargained but don't have to be. And the NLRB oftentimes, and the courts sometimes, have to determine whether or not something should be compulsory or voluntary. So after the Wagner Act, which if keep in mind that was in 1935 in the heart of the Depression, right? 12 years later, and for some reason these three union laws are all 12 years apart, but the Taft-Hartley Act was passed. And keep in mind, so we had the end of the Depression, we had World War II, right? And we had, after that, a lot of growing strength and a dynamic economy, but a lot of growing strength in the union, which employers said was maybe starting to put a damper on their investment ability and whatnot, and certainly the cards were stacked in favor now of the unions. Remember, I said before this, there's no doubt that the chips rode with the employers, but with the Wagner Act, the cards were definitely stacked in favor of the unions, and so there had been rapid growth of union, and the U.S. wanted to ensure the free flow of commerce. They set in place, one thing was a 80-day cooling off period. What that calls for is that the government can, at their sole discretion, ask for the sides to have an 80-day cooling off period, so employees won't go on strike and employers won't lock them out. They won't negotiate for 80 days. They'll go to their separate corners and just go back to work. Okay, and then at the 80 days, they can come back and talk about the items. Okay. One of the big ones, though, was that it gave management free speech. So from that period from 35 to 47, if employees decided they wanted to form a union, management couldn't say anything. They couldn't provide arguments against the union. They couldn't talk to employees about the advantages or disadvantages of being in a union. It made it pretty difficult, and that's probably why we had a rapid growth of union membership. Okay, once they got the chance to speak and give their side, it kind of started to put a damper a little bit. So, Federal Mediation Conciliation Service that set that up so that unions and employers, especially in those that are important for the economy, okay, and that's one of the things, that 80-day cooling off period and things like that. Would the government come in and impose an 80-day cooling off period here at the hospital if the nurses were threatening to strike? Yeah, maybe. I kind of doubt it. That's kind of small potatoes compared to the whole economy, and that's kind of what it was set up for, with things that had a really economic impact. So, yeah, the free speech, and this is for management, statements made by employers frequently were targeted as unfair labor claims until Taft-Hartley remedied the problem. And you guys can kind of read through that. So what's that leave us with? Well, we can have a closed shop, and actually closed shops are illegal, okay, but we still kind of hear about them, I guess. But a closed shop would say that you have to be in the union before the organization can even hire you, okay? And those are illegal now. A union shop, which is probably the most common, says that membership's required after employment, so they have to join up within 30 days. And that's fairly typical. So the employer goes through the normal hiring process, but then the people that they hire are compelled to join the union after that. Okay. An agency shop is that dues can be required, so you can be forced to pay your dues, but you don't necessarily belong to the union. I believe Montana actually does allow an agency shop. I don't know too many that participate in that, but I think we do have that right. Basically, it says, again, you're not participating, but you're getting some benefit from the union negotiations and those types of things, so you pay your dues. You can actually ask that some of those dues either be returned to you or maybe go to a different cause if you so desire. And that would be the portion of the dues that don't effectively go into collective bargaining, that maybe the union uses for other purposes like politics, which they do. A lot of states, there are a lot of them now that do have right to work laws. Montana is not a right to work state, but we are surrounded by right to work states. Okay? And again, there's nothing about right to work that seems to be inherently good or bad either. It just kind of, you could look up stats on both, and you could argue until you're blue in the face with the guy sitting next to you, okay? And I'm not sure that you'd get it accomplished. A lot of people would ask, why is Montana? We're kind of surrounded. It's obvious that we're in a place that in an area where typically right to work would be something that we might go for, and we've had it on a ballot several times. It hasn't passed. I don't know what it would do in today if we had a ballot again. But one of the reasons is Montana had a long history of strong union membership, and it's because if you read the history of Montana, you go back to the Copper Kings, and they kind of ruled Montana for a while, 100 years or so ago. And there was this big backlash, and part of the backlash was the formation of unions and whatnot that kind of put the Copper Kings in their place, and also even on into the government of Montana. And so Montana became very much for a long time a very, very pro-union state, and remains so to this day, as you can see by the map. Let's pause there, and we'll come back and talk about the Landrum-Griffith Act.